We're talking about how to set up an LLC in Utah, and what you can see behind me is a document, a checklist that we're going to work through to make this really easy and simple for you. And then we're going to be working through this checklist in particular. But before we get to that, I want to talk about common pitfalls that people have when setting up their LLCs that end up in the LLC dumpster fire. Now, that happens when you're not familiar with terms such as piercing the corporate veil, commingling funds, registered agent, and pass-through taxation. And also what I want to talk about in this video is things such as how the LLC renewal process works, and then also any kind of necessary licenses and permits that are needed after you get your LLC formed. Now, the reason I call it the dumpster fire is people get their LLCs set up, but they're not really sure exactly how all of these things work together, and they don't know how to maintain that LLC, so then it leads to tens of thousands of dollars in legal damages. The purpose of this video is to help you get your LLC set up, but also to avoid those common issues. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to zoom out a little bit, and we're going to talk about what an LLC actually does, so then we can zoom in and then get your LLC set up correctly. Now, when you take a look at this drop down here, you can see that it says it offers limited liability protection, and also it offers pass-through taxation. What I'd like to do is go through a hypothetical example of owning a coffee shop without an LLC to show how this kind of breaks down when it compares to owning it with an LLC. In this case here, you see the business owner in the center. Everything is connected back to the business owner. On the left side, you have their personal home, car, and bank account. On the right-hand side, you have the business assets. So that's the business bank account, point of sale, the physical location, the espresso machine, the lights. When everything is connected back to the business owner, this creates a lot of liability for this individual. But now when you look at it and we're owning an LLC that owns the coffee shop, it looks very different. We have the business owner on the left-hand side with their personal assets, and on the right-hand side, we have what we're calling Acme Coffee LLC that owns all those assets within the LLC. Now, the important part here is this red line in the middle. That division there is something known as the corporate veil. Now, if you recall from the beginning of the video, we had talked about piercing the corporate veil. We're also going to explain that through a concept called commingling funds right now. So what commingling funds is a lot of times new business owners, they get their LLC set up, but they don't get their business bank account set up right away, and they run the business transactions through their personal bank account. This is something called commingling funds. Now, let's say that somebody got hurt in your coffee shop and they hire an attorney and they're going to sue you. What that attorney is going to try to do, if they're good, is they're going to try to find cracks in your LLC so that they can come after not only your business assets, but your personal assets as well. If they find out that you've been commingling funds and the judge agrees with them and grants them permission to pierce the corporate veil, that's when they can come after your personal assets as well. So again, this is why all these things are so important to understand. Now, one of the things I want to talk about right now is an explanation of pass-through taxation. A lot of people get confused as far as how taxation works with LLCs. It's actually pretty simple. Here you have Acme Coffee LLC. It grossed $140,000, $90,000 of expenses, which creates $50,000 of net income. I mean, we're oversimplifying these numbers here for the sake of this example. But what happens with that $50,000 in net income is it passes through to the business owner, or it's also sometimes referred to as flow-through taxation. So what that means for you is the IRS is actually just taxing you, the individual. They're not taxing the LLC. Your profits from that LLC flow through, pass through to you, the business owner. This is actually nice because it keeps your costs low. You don't have this like separate entity that you're having to do at tax time. That can where your tax bill can kind of add up to as far as like having a CPA prepare your taxes for you. But that's something I wanted you to be aware of. Now, sometimes people think there's a tax advantage with the LLC. There is not. You can get tax deductions, the expenses if you had a sole proprietorship. Like those coffee beans, you're still going to write off if you had a sole prop. But where it does come into play is in the future, when you're making $40,000 to $50,000 in net income, you can apply an S Corp designation to reduce your tax burden. That's something we're going to get into in the third video in this series. And I just make mention of that because this is a video series and I want you to watch the whole thing. So it's not just about getting your LLC set up. It's not just about properly maintaining it, but also what are the different ways that you can optimize your business for taxes or other things that you may not be considering right now. So at this point in the video though, what I want to do is talk about this checklist to start your LLC. First step here is just get this checklist for yourself. This is a living, breathing Notion doc based in the cloud. And there's a lot of cool bonuses and different things in here. So there's a glossary of terms, which is helpful. Highly recommend watching this LLC scam video. It might save you $150 because a lot of people fall victim to that mailer scam. But then there's also bonuses here. We have a yearly accounting calendar in here, and this is going to get updated every year. This is as of 2024. In a future video in the series, we're going to explain all these dates on here to you and how those work. But there's a free charitable opportunity. There's even an AI chatbot, which is pretty cool. So I can go in here and search something like how to start an LLC Utah, and this is giving us a specific guided list of everything you need to consider when you're in Utah. You can also do things like, how do I register an EIN? Well, we're going to explain that in a little bit, but other things too. If you're still wondering what your LLC name is going to be, you can use this tool to brainstorm LLC names as well. Now, what I want to do is go back up here and then talk about briefly which route you should go when you're getting set up. There's really 3 ways to go. You can go through the state website. That's the Utah Secretary of State website. When you do that, you can either download a PDF and mail it in, or you can use their online portal. There's also online LLC services. These are popular legal tools that are out there. The cool thing is a lot of them now are $0 plus state fee, but there are a lot of upsells with those tools as well. And then also you can go through a business attorney, which is going to be the most expensive, but also the most dialed in for you. In this particular video, we're just going to go through the route of going through the state website. But in the next video, all the content is specifically geared to which route you should go. And the reason I always recommend watching that video is I have seen people overpay by $1,500 for their LLC simply because they didn't realize all the hidden fees that were stacking up with the service provider they were choosing. So we're going to make sure that you don't overspend when it comes to setting up your LLC as well. Then what you need to do is decide on a business name for your LLC. There's a few things to keep in mind here. One is it needs to be a unique name within the state of Utah. It can't be a name that somebody else already has. And the other thing that you should consider is it doesn't need to be perfect. And the reason for that is earlier we talked about Acme Coffee LLC. Well, you could have a DBA, doing business as, or a fictitious business name underneath that is going to be something that is going to be your brand name. So that might be something like Espresso Yourself Cafe is that DBA or fictitious name. So just know that really what matters is that you have a unique LLC name, not necessarily a great LLC name, because usually the brand name of the company is something else. Now, what you need to do though is you need to go to the state database and then search to see if that name is available in the state of Utah. So we're going to click here. Right here on the BizBuddy website. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to look at the business entity search. Now, if I put in Utes, what you're going to find is a lot of different names on here. We have 10 different names for Utes. That makes sense. But if I just kind of go like this on the keyboard and do a search, what you're going to find is that there's no business name. You get that green check mark. That is what you're looking for the name that you search in this database. So once you have that, you're ready to move on to the next steps. So now what we're looking at is getting your LLC set up. Now, I'm going to click these first 2 right here. Register your LLC name and write your articles of organization. Now, the articles of organization is the actual document that you fill out and send in to the Secretary of State to form your LLC. When you register your LLC name, you're simply just registering the name, but you do not have your LLC set up yet. It's like a little half step you can do. It's like buying a domain name, but not actually building the website yet. But what we're going to be talking about here is going through the full process of filing your articles of organization. Again, we have another helpful link here. These bullet points will explain what goes into the articles of organization. But what I want to do here is make sure that we're going through it line item by line item, just highlighting a few different things that they kind of just gloss over too quick on this PDF. All right, so they're calling it a certificate of formation. This is your articles of organization. Each article, they give you an explainer of what goes into that. But what I want to do is just kind of scroll down, and we're going to go through this together right now. So first one here, filing entity name is a limited liability company. The name of the entity is. So that's the thing that's available that we found in the state database. So what we're looking at here is the articles of organization here. And you see that there's a non-refundable processing fee of $54. That gets paid to the state, the Secretary of State, for filing this. There's no way of getting around that. You're going to pay that fee. But then you can see they have the name of the limited liability company, their principal office address, and then number 3 here is the name of the registered agent. So this was something that I wanted to cover in this video because they kind of gloss over it. Here's the 2 things that you really need to know about this is they have to have a physical mailing address and it cannot be a P.O. box, and it is required for your LLC to keep and maintain a registered agent service. Now, a registered agent, if you're not familiar, is a third party that handles handles important information and documentation for your business. So in the unfortunate case of you being sued at the coffee shop, what's going to happen is you're going to get something called a service of process notice. That's the notice letting you know that you need to show up in court, you're being summoned to court. Your registered agent is going to make sure that you get that information and also all the important documentation that you need when you're showing up to court. So it's a very important piece of maintaining your LLC. Now, when you go through the state website, they don't actually give you any services for this. They just kind of leave it open. When you go through the online LLC services, they all partner with registered agent services, and one in particular actually provides you that service for free for the first year, which we'll talk about in the next video. But what I want to focus in really on this video is just going through the documents, knowing what you need to know when you're getting set up. Some of this can be pretty redundant because especially if you're like a solopreneur, name and address of the members and the organizer are going to be the same. Usually you're like, a lot of times too, your mailing address and your business address may be the same if you're working from home. But this one's a little tricky. It's optional, but it says duration. Most people are going to be perpetual. Sometimes people are setting up an LLC just for a very specified period of time, but that's something you can do there. And then your purpose as well. So this is a pretty small document, one page. Mail this in. You can also go through the Utah website, which has an online portal that you can go through these steps as well. But again, the cons of the state website is it's hard to deal with, and they don't give you any kind of registered agent services. So what I want to talk about now, though, is now that we've assigned a registered agent, let's assume you found one or you're going through one of these online legal tools, is you file your articles of organization with the Secretary of State. You've paid the $54 fee. But what about creating and signing an LLC operating agreement? Now, not required by the state of Utah. There's only 5 states that are required at the time of formation. But this is a really important thing to do for your business. Basically what it is it's a situation of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Let's say that your coffee franchise blows up. You have like 19 locations and you have a business partner. Now, what that LLC operating agreement will do is it'll list who the members of the LLC are, what are their roles and responsibility, and it'll also get into things like what happens if somebody wants out of the business. Because let's say your business partner says they want out, how do you determine what the value is and how much they should be paid? Well, if it's laid out in that operating agreement, you just point to that and that's the deal. But if you don't have those things figured out ahead of time, this could be a very expensive legal battle trying to figure these things out. Lots of time with attorneys, a lot of frustration. That's why an LLC operating agreement is so important. Now, you don't have to have it day one. You can certainly get it set up in a month or two or whatever you want. But typically these things fall off if you don't get them done right away. When you use the online legal tools, they will have a boilerplate template for you. You can also go through a business attorney who can really dial one in for you, but it's going to be much more expensive when you use a business attorney. Now, after LLC formation, one of the things you should do is set up an EIN. There's an IRS link here, and an EIN is an employer identification number. It's like a social security number for your business so they can identify you. But you have to have an EIN if you have employees on payroll. Also, if you're applying for things like a business loan or an office space, sometimes they'll say like, what's your social security number, your EIN, TIN? It's just a lot more professional when you're putting in your EIN there when you're dealing with these different services. So I highly suggest getting this set up. It's free to do with the IRS. But what I'll say here too is with those online LLC services, they will do this for you as well, but it's usually in a mid-tier package, which costs a few extra dollars. So once you get that set up, what I want you to think about is looking into the necessary business licenses and permits. There's an SBA resource on here, which is helpful. You can actually scroll down and you'll actually see your state on here. And then what you can do is get more resources this way. But what I want to do at this point is kind of just use an example of starting a brewery. Now, if you have a brewery, you may be brewing beer, distributing beer, and serving beer on premise. Those 3 things all could potentially have different licenses and permits attached to them, right? Because if you're going to serve alcohol, you need a license to serve alcohol kind of thing. So those can happen on the federal, state, and local government levels, which I know sounds like a lot. But what I would recommend is you can start out, you can call your town, city, or your town or city clerk and just tell them, hey, I'm starting this type of business. I'm wondering if there's any licenses and permits I need. Most businesses don't need them, but if you're going to do stuff like a dentist, a chiropractor, a construction company, these types of things, they may require licenses and permits. And then what you want to do is work through the state level and the federal level. The online LLC services out there, they will provide this as a research tool, which is an additional fee, but they make sure that you are set up with all the proper licenses and permits. The way that it works is every single business category has its own NAICS code, and they look at that code and then where your location is and figure out exactly what it is that your businesses need for the licenses and permits. Now, what we're going to talk about in the next video is we're going to deep dive on the comparison of going through the state route, going through online tools, or attorneys. And we're going to be doing that by talking about the fees associated with starting your LLC. There's actually an embedded cost calculator on this page. I'm going to show you down to the dollar what it's going to cost to own and maintain that LLC for 5 years. Then next, we're going to get into star ratings and comparing these different services. We're going to look at why state websites can become a pain, and it has to do with domestic and foreign LLCs. Really important that you understand this today. And then we're also going to go into questions worth asking when you're comparing these different services. So you'll see a video on the screen. That's going to be the next video in our series. And again, I highly suggest you watch that because I've seen people overpay by $1,500 when they get their LLC set up. And also, make sure you get this document and this checklist for yourself. It will be in the description below. All right, we'll catch you in the next video.